Everyone knows that racism is a cancer and it still exists in pockets of the country. But because Biden has no positive agenda to share with Black America, he has to sell fear and engage in the most despicable slander.
White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison. It's been allowed to grow faster and fester in our communities. Domestic terrorism rooted in white supremacy is the greatest terrorist threat we face in the homeland. The greatest threat. We have to act.
This whole thing is about how Fox News is manipulating the things that the president says in order to fit their dishonest narrative. But first, before all that, I have to point out some of the more startling things about what Laura Ingraham is suggesting here about terrorism rooted in white supremacy. She starts by saying, everyone knows racism is bad and exists in pockets of the country to avoid being seen as appealing to those pockets. But then in the very next breath, she says that Biden's rejection of it is despicable slander. Well, who is he slandering? The white supremacists in those pockets of the country that you apparently are pandering to here? The reason that we know that they're pandering to these pockets is because Ingraham's video edited out a very important part of Biden's point about where that conclusion about white supremacist terrorism comes from.
White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison. It's been allowed to grow faster and fester in our communities to the point where the intelligence community is determined, the U.S. intelligence community is determined that domestic terrorism rooted in white supremacy is the greatest terrorist threat we face in the homeland.
In order to keep their audience comfortably believing that white supremacy is largely a thing of the past and that it only exists in pockets, Ingraham had to eliminate the fact that U.S. intelligence communities have determined this, not Joe Biden, the guy that they've conditioned their audience to hate, but not for the negative things that he's actually done.
He looks more like a disengaged retiree on this one.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page. Critics hitting Biden over this video in particular during the Maui wildfire memorial service where the president bows his head, closes his eyes, many saying that he may have nodded off. Yet another moment highlighting the concerns over his age and mental fitness. Look, we're not with him at that moment, but we've seen this before.
Harris, there are some people arguing that maybe he was engaging in a moment of solemn prayer or reflection. That's
Yes.
absolutely possible. I will say and confess, as someone who has maybe in the past struggled to stay awake in class or at church perhaps as a kid, I know the look of battling to stay awake while nodding off. That's what I saw in that video. And look, he was on a plane for a long time. He was flying, but you got to pull it together. When you're the president of the United States, you cannot be falling asleep in an event like that.
The Fox News edit here was simply a repeated 4-second moment to make it seem like Biden was asleep. You can tell by the way the man in the red behind him is leaning over multiple times in that continuous loop. Here's that moment again in Maui without the looping and how Biden's eyes were actually open because he was moving and also contemplating.
During the Maui wildfire memorial service where the president bows his head, closes his eyes, many saying that he may have nodded off. Yet another moment highlighting the concerns over his age and mental fitness.
We are a community that relies on family, on ohana, whether by blood or by friendship. But like many others,
I'm not sure if they criticized the one-time $700 payment from FEMA to the victims after wildfires tore through Hawaii. You know, something that actually affects residents' ability to survive and also rebuild. But everything actually wants to come back to a political slant in hopes of misinforming their audience instead of actually telling what's going on. There's nothing new, though, because remember back in 2022 when Biden was defending the student loan debt relief plan, and Fox ran this.
And how's the president responding to questions about whether his latest political move is fair? Well, take a look.
What about people who paid their loans, though, struggle to pay their loans, and now others don't have to?
The infamous Biden back. We see it all the time.
First of all, the idea of a politician walking away from questions after they've ended their press conferences, something so normal and common that I had to watch it again to see if there was something I was missing that was happening in the background or something. No, but it was just him leaving. Not only that, what they didn't show was him answering the same question from another reporter right before Fox's reporter decided to shout out his.
Thank you.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact,
do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses if she wants these guys to give them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
What about people who paid their loans, though, struggle to pay their loans, and now others don't have to?
The infamous Biden back. We see it all the time.
The point wasn't to get his answer to their viewers. It was to claim he ignored what they portrayed as a tough question that blows the lid off of his entire scheme to provide tax-paying Americans with some sort of relief. You know, this kind of manipulation of real moments in Biden's presidency is a major part of the radicalization of Republican voters. It's what replaced their principles of small government and fiscal responsibility, which their leaders never really believed in or implemented, to how many companies are woke, and I wonder how many gay people are having sex right now. Those are the stances that they've pushed their viewers to actually think and care about instead of the things that are affecting their lives.